We are convened as of 5:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I would respectfully ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you're recognized to speak. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Please note that under the current circumstances, the official meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. For the immediate future, the official meetings of the Board of Directors will be held via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. Visit rtd-denver.com and scroll to the bottom of the page for the link to the Board of Directors page. Would like to be acknowledged during tonight's proceeding. I would ask that you please raise your virtual hand and wait for me to call you before proceeding to speak. Can everybody hear me okay? My internet was a little unstable. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
There was some instability times there, Chair, but we're hearing you now.
All right, thank you. Speaking out of turn will only add confusion to the record and to the proceedings. Directors and staff are participating by phone, and I believe I know we're going to do the roll call, but I believe we may have Director Tisdale by phone. Can also raise their virtual hands to indicate that they would like to speak by pressing *9. To toggle your mute setting on the phone, press *6. I'd like to now call the roll for the committee members. Julien Bouquet.
Present.
Chantel Lewis.
Present.
Doug Tisdale. Let's see if he is. Do we see any virtual hands? Let's see, where might, there is Director Tisdale. I see your photo. You're there? All right, I'll assume you're there based on your photo. Let me continue. For the record, I see that we have 5 directors present. Are there any other directors, perhaps I'll also acknowledge, who are here who are not on the committee? I beg your pardon? I heard some noise, but I didn't hear somebody saying anything.
I think that's Director
My
Tisdale.
fault. I apologize. Yes, I forgot to put the mute on. I will do that now. Thank you very much for your kind patience.
No worries. Oh, there's Director Broom. Okay, so welcome as well, Director Broom. Okay, I'd like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current immediately preceding month. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you are dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind, by participating in this process, you're being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will need to be submitted in writing. If any speaker has documentation or reference materials for our committee, or if any member of the public would like to submit written comments, please email these materials to the email address rtd.boardoffice. Or directors or staff may contact speakers following their comments if they raise matters lend themselves to follow-up. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names, and each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. And let's see, Ms. McManus, do you know if we have any speakers?
I see no speakers in the queue, and there were no comments sent in via the email box.
All right.
Director Williams has her hand up because she'd like to be recognized as being in attendance.
Oh, my apologies, Director Williams. So yes, we would like to recognize Director Williams. And so I'm also sorry to the directors. I have one computer open, so I'm toggling between my video and my script. So please do bear with me. My apologies to you, Director Williams, and previously to Director Broom that I did not immediately see you. Okay, so we have no comments or nobody wishing to speak with us by phone or by video, or rather by phone, and we have no emails. Therefore, we will close the public comment at this time. Information from external entities. There is no information from external entities this month. And going to the next agenda item, we have one recommended action on the agenda this evening. That recommended action is 2022 Title VI Program Update.
Director Rosenthal?
Yes, Director Williams.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Apologize. I believe that the general
Okay.
manager had something that she wanted to say.
Yes, I will get to that. Thank you very much, Director Williams. I'm just introducing the topic, and I will most certainly ensure that our general manager has an opportunity to say, to introduce this as well. For the Board of Directors to adopt the 2022 Title VI Program Update Report in compliance with federal laws, regulations, and guidelines related to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI. Do we have a motion?
So moved, Director Lewis.
Second, Director Bouquet.
Thank you, Directors Lewis and Bouquet. Before we hear from Carl Green Jr., Transit Equity Manager, to present any pertinent information regarding this item, I'd like to call on our General Manager and CEO, Deborah Johnson, if she has any introductory remarks.
Yes, so thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good evening to all of you board members and to all those that are virtually assembled. I am Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO, as introduced. As you stated momentarily, Carl Green Jr., who is our Transit Service Equity Manager, will be presenting to you our Title VI program update. But in advance of this presentation, I would be remiss not to state that equity is a core principle of RTD's functional mission to provide public transit services to the Denver metro region. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Executive Order 12898 pertaining to environmental justice has reinforced this principle. From my review of previous RTD Title VI programs, equity was defined by law and was primarily used as a conduit for compliance. Expounding upon previous efforts, the 2022 Title VI program update was systematically developed and organized to not only meet compliance, but to exceed the standard, thus affording the momentous opportunity to truly operationalize transit equity efforts within the agency and especially for our most vulnerable customers. The 2022 Title VI program differs from previous program updates in that the updated program is positioned to be in alignment with the agency's strategic plan, specifically the priorities of community value, customer excellence, employee ownership, and staff has integrated 4 metrics that are contained in the performance scorecard on pages 24, 25, and 26 of the strategic plan. And those metrics are community perception of equity, community perception as relates to language services, accessibility, and those are in support of community value. Equitable distribution of services and resources across the RTD system are the metrics in support of customer excellence. And then employee awareness of the Title VI program rounds out our employee ownership priority. So by integrating elements of the Title VI program into the strategic plan, this canonizes the agency's overall approach to achieve true transit equity, to uphold our Title VI assurances, as well as to ensure we are making lives better through connections. Simply put, this program update will serve as a catalyst to elevate equity in a way that exceeds the Federal Transit Administration's requirements, and that RTD is moving beyond the letter and spirit of Title VI, which can be applauded across transit agencies as a best practice for achieving equity. So my sincere thanks to Carl Green Jr., who has approached enhancing our Title VI program by embodying the agency values of passion, trustworthiness, respect, collaboration, diversity, and ownership. with the intention of making lives better through connections. So I will now yield the floor to Mr. Green to take you through the Title VI program. So I just wanted to give him a shout out. So thank you so much. We're fortunate to have him on the team.
And thank you very much, General Manager Johnson. Just real quick, sorry, Mr. Green, I do have to recognize a couple other directors have joined us. That would be Director Catlin and Director Whitmore. Any other directors I'm missing who just joined us? I think that's it. Without further ado, thank you, General Manager Johnson. And here is Mr. Carl Green Jr. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'd be remiss if I did not say thank you to our General Manager and CEO. That was a wonderful introduction, and it got my juices flowing and a little bit pumped up, just really excited. I know I heard a lot about Title VI, and I can hear that all day and all evening long. That's something that I'm truly passionate about, especially when we think about civil rights and social justice. So I just appreciate that. And with that being said, Chair Rosenthal, fellow RTD Board of Directors, I'll go ahead and pull up the slide deck and begin the presentation. All right, once again, good evening. My name is Carl Green Jr., Transit Equity Manager, Civil Rights Division. And just to reiterate, I'll be presenting on the 2022 Title VI program update. So just to give you an outline of what to expect for this evening, I will give an overview, a Title VI overview, the requirements as it relates to the Federal Transit Administration and federal law. I will move into the proposed policy changes, and then I will get into the service monitoring report, as well as provide an update, an overview update of our language access plan efforts. And then rounding it out, I'll be going over the recommendation as well as the next steps for the RTD Board of Directors. So the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 essentially is the authority that sets the legal precedent for transit properties. In essence, Title VI provides transit agencies with non-discrimination requirements for folks that fall under race, color, national origin. And the one thing that I did want to mention, as General Manager and CEO mentioned, equity defined by law. And with this program update, this is something that we see as the floor, and it's more or less a compliance-driven aspect. But the beauty of this 2022 Title VI program update, which is very exciting that I get to present this to the RTD Board of Directors, is that y'all have the opportunity to adopt and approve of a civil rights program update that's going to set the tone for years to come. So I just really wanted to express that and say how excited I am to present this to you all this evening. So as a requirement of the FTA, they require that every 3 years, transit properties provide a summary of RTD's efforts to promote equity and ensure compliance, specifically non-discrimination within their Title VI program update. Specifically for this evening, what this update includes is system-wide service standards and policies, the 2021 Service Performance Monitoring Report, and the Language Access Plan. As described on pages 22 and 23 of the board packet, there are 3 proposed Title VI policy updates. We have the disparate impact policy, the disproportionate burden policy, and access considerations, which I will go into further detail momentarily. Prior to speaking to the proposed policy updates, I will first define the current service disparate impact policy as described on board packet 22. And as the policy is defined, it is to determine the effects of a major service reduction at the line level, the percentage of RTD's impacted minority population compared to the percentage of RTD's impacted non-minority population. If the percentage of the minority population impacted is at least 10% greater than the percentage of non-minority population impacted, then the impact of those changes will be considered disparate. As you can see in the bottom of the slide here, I would like to make note that this is the exact same policy for low-income for low-income population, but it is defined under the disproportionate burden policy. For simplicity's sake and to save one slide, I just wanted to communicate that it's the exact same policy at the line level. As far as the proposed policy addition to supplement the line level, here is the proposed policy addition to the way in which we conduct service equity analysis. This is a best practice or a methodology that we utilize, or that was introduced rather, during the COVID service reductions equity analysis that took place, that was presented before the board last April. So the addition is as stated: to determine the system-wide effects of major service change on more than one route or line, it's the percentage of RTD's impacted minority population is compared to the percentage of the RTD's impacted non-minority population. And the threshold is as following: if the percentage of minority population is at least 10% greater than the percentage of the non-minority population impacted, then the overall impact of changes will be considered disparate. Again, here, the exact same policy is being proposed for low-income populations, which falls under the service disproportionate burden policy. Before I move on to the next slide, I did want to mention, by introducing or adding this to our service equity analysis policies, the DI and DB policy, this allows us to take a deeper dive and a better understanding of the nature of impacts that we are proposing during our service run board proposals. So again, this is a best practice and something that allows us to really keen in on the nature of impacts, whether that is service increases or reductions to our routes and our lines. So that's something that I did want to mention. One thing I did want to call out in the original slide deck, it mentioned proposed policy. I did make one correction, and I just wanted to mention to you all this evening that this is in fact a proposed standard, not a policy. But all the same, this is something that needs to be approved by the board as far as a methodology that is being utilized as part of our service equity analysis. So the proposed standard is to include access points of interest. And the importance of this, which aligns with the Reimagine RTD principles that was adopted by the board, is in addition to looking at how are we adding or reducing service to certain areas of our service district and where people are, and equally as important as that is to get a better understanding of where people are going. So the key public service destinations that we're looking at is retail and convenience stores, schools, so pre-K to college, social services, senior housing, grocery stores, and affordable housing. We're also baking in or factoring in employment centers. So why are we making these changes? So this is in addition to, in alignment with the Reimagine RTD principles, guiding principles, we received a lot of community feedback. As it relates to the community feedback, this is another requirement of the FTA. So for any proposed policy changes or standards to our program, we need to ensure that there is public involvement. So by virtue of reaching out to community-based organizations, which were over 36, to administering a transit equity survey, to presenting and garnering feedback from the Citizens Advisory Committee, to, again, directly connecting with community-based organizations to inform the way in which we are applying or adding in potential changes to our Title VI program. So I now would like to cover the Title VI Service Monitoring Report. As the slide here denotes, this is also a requirement that's set forth by the FTA, which states that agencies will conduct ongoing performance monitoring on all modes of service. And I'd like to emphasize that it's fixed route modes of service. It's required from a compliance standpoint. Again, here, it's directly tied to the RTD 2021-2026 strategic plan. And one thing that I wanted to emphasize is the FTA requires us to conduct this on a triennial basis. RTD is moving in the direction of doing this on an annual basis, as again, it relates directly to the strategic plan. So instead of waiting 3 years, we're able to get in front of of our service performance monitoring, which I'll get into a little bit more detail here in just a moment. So as reported on pages 56 through 71 of the board packet, this analysis in this report compared minority and or low income access to that of non-minority and or higher income access across 6 service performance metrics for data compiled during calendar year 2021. So the 6 different metrics are revenue hours, which is the hours while in service, including trips start to finish. And we're looking specifically again at revenue hours. Secondly, we're looking at on-time performance. And this RTD defines it as on time as no more than 5 minutes late or 1 minute early, and it's measured by time points. And then vehicle loads. Essentially what this looks at is how overcrowded or crowded our buses are. And what we're looking at is looking at the maximum load factor, both seated and standing. And specifically, as the service monitoring report denotes, is we looked at midday and peak. And the justification for this is that's where our highest ridership is. And if you look through the report, there's a comparison of the results. The next one is service availability. So in line with what the FTA describes, it's RTD considers persons within 1/2 mile of bus stops and rail stations as having service available. And then the next one is stops amenities. So we're looking at the distribution of amenities across our system, specifically looking at shelters, seating, lighting, waste receptacles, etc., in order to identify any potential disparities. And then the last item we look at is vehicle assignments. And differing from the 2019 is what we're looking at here is the average age of vehicles that is being distributed across our service district, specifically our routes. So to get folks essentially on the same page, I'd like to cover down on the strategic plan and rating scale. And this is something that I developed to be in line with the RTD strategic plan to more or less communicate if we're on target, if there's a caution where there's an area for an opportunity or improvement, and then we have off target. So by definition, what you can see but in green to the left on target, it is as good or better on minority or low income routes or lines, and it's either equal or less than 10%. Where we have caution, where it meets the measure but flagged for an area of improvement, and that's greater than 10% and less than 20%. And then we have off target, which basically means it does not meet the measure and it results in an adverse impact. Within the FTA circular, there's only one measure, and it's that 20% threshold. So being proactive, we have established this particular rating scale to ensure that we're moving in the right direction and able to course correct any potential issues prior to getting to that off target 20% threshold. All right, so the first results that I wanted to cover down on is distribution of amenities. I'd like to call out that this metric is specifically looking at the percentage of stops with amenity types on minority versus non-minority lines or routes. And specifically what we're looking at is, again, on the screen, seating, lighting, elevators, digital displays, shelters, signs, maps, trash cans, and ticket vending machines. And I'd also like to call out the little key legend on the bottom, which indicates if there's a green check mark, that means the performance metric meets, or the performance meets metric at the level indicated, whereas the X is the performance does not meet. The big takeaway here is, although we look at it by mode, so whether that's local, regional, light rail, commuter rail, individually, we also, where the results come into play is looking at it at the system level. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through these results is, although there could be a mode of service like local where it could be flagged, in order to meet the metric, it's at the system level. So that's something that I wanted to call out. But as you can see here, comparing minority versus non-minority, that we did meet this metric as far as an equitable distribution of our amenities across minority bus stops and platforms. Now we will be getting into the other remaining 5 metrics, and that rounds us up for the service standards. Again, we're specifically looking at minority versus non-minority. And before I get into the actual table, I did want to call out the acronyms. And as you can see here, LCL is local limited, regional is RCL, light rail, LRT, commuter rail, CRT, and system, which is SYS. And this is, remove this so I can look at the screen. All right, so as we look at vehicle loads across the board, we can see that it does meet the performance metric as far as comparing non-minority versus non-minority. It's as good or better. So that's a good thing. And as we look at revenue hours, you can see that what's called out, it does meet the metric. Again, here, as we look at as good or better, if we look to the far right, at the system level, it does exceed that 10%, or it's within that 10% at the system level. But if we move to the left where it's less than or greater than 10%, we can see that at the system level, it does not exceed. So although one metric for light rail, it is flagged of exceeding that 20%, and that's an area for improvement. But overall, if we look at revenue hours, it does meet the metric. And then the next item is on-time performance. So again, here the results are overall, it does meet the metric. So we are in good standing. And then as we look at vehicle assignment, something that I wanted to mention, which I'll round us out at the tail end, is that there is a dashed line for vehicle assignment. But if I could just take a moment, might as well bring it up here since I'm seeing some head nods, is for vehicle assignments, this is a metric that we are currently still working on. And we want to ensure that we are accurate. And I know I received some great information from Fred Worthen and from Jesse and company on how we assign our vehicles. So this is something that we are looking to take a deeper dive. But I did want to mention that the FTA denotes this as permissible, just so long as we have a plan, which we do. And I'll be able to report on this a little bit later this year. But for the sake of this, we are in good standing by moving forward with the adoption of the Title VI 2022 program update. And then as we look at service availability, again, here we meet the metric as far as being able to provide service or having service available as good or better, comparing minority versus non-minority. All right, so now I'll cover down on low income versus higher income lines and routes, similar to the results of the minority versus non-minority. Is overall for distribution of amenities, we did meet the measure for an equitable distribution comparing low income versus non-low income. The thing that I did want to call out, that although there are red X's on the as good or better, it's still within that 10%, so we still meet that standard. I'll now cover the service standards, vehicle loads, revenue hours, and on-time performance, vehicle assignment, service availability. Similar to minority versus non-minority, it meets the metric for all, it meets all 5 metrics, with the caveat that, which is in comparison to the revenue hours, or when we're looking at revenue hours, it's specifically commuter rails where there is a greater than 20%. However, at the system level, we still meet the metric. So this slide gives a high-level overview. If we are going to have a dashboard, if you will, it gives the overall results at a high level. Again, there's the service performance monitoring report that's in the board packet, which covers down on the specific percentages, and it breaks it down pretty robustly. But if there's any questions, feel free to let me know. But I just wanted to mention that, again, the RTD strategic plan ensuring equitable distribution of services and resources across the RTD system, there's a green check mark, a green upward arrow indicating that across these different metrics that we've met all targets. So, and this is what I would say that's different from the previous program update, that this took a deeper dive into the analysis. And I would just like to applaud staff across the agency. We've had, this dates back to 6-7 months ago, to be able to clean the data, compile it, wrangle it, and present it in a way that's meaningful, and to better understand if there are any potential disparities. But as the biggest takeaway that I can say with this service performance monitoring report is that we met all targets, and we are moving forward with the vehicle assignments to be able to accurately and consistently report on this measure. So I'll now get into the language access plan. This is something that I'm really excited about. Overall, the intent is to increase language access. And the beauty of this program is there's a way in which there's a tool called the 4-factor analysis, which is very data-centric and also community engagement driven on get a better internally and externally to better wrap our heads around how do we increase language access, what are the best practices, and how do we move the agency in a direction that is moving forward with respect to language justice. So by virtue of that 4-factor analysis, which differs from the previous one, which had 7 safe harbor languages, and that is defined as folks, English language learners that understand, read, and write English less than very well. So we have 21 that was identified, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the level of support across the agency, ranging all the way to the top from our general manager and CEO to our chief administration officer, Leah Riley, and just the civil rights division across the board, AGMs and communications and transportation, et cetera, because this is going to be a all hands on deck effort. And the beauty of this, as you're seeing on the third bullet, the tier 2 activities to deepen focus, what we're moving forward with to really codify and solidify what we're doing as an agency is creating these guidelines index. So what this affords us to do is being able to update and monitor our language access plan on a consistent basis, to be able to do the research, whether that's working directly with community-based organizations that are serving these populations. And I'm very excited what we have in store of being able to hold focus groups in different languages and really just get a better understanding. It's a two-way street of how do we improve this. And then lastly, the 2022 to 2025 implementation calendar. This is something that's different from the previous program update in the sense where we are creating a project timeline over the course of 3 years. So we have a target that we are aiming for prior to the next program update in 2025. So this is going to be a guiding map, if you will, for us to be able to increase language access across the board. And as you can imagine, by reading just the language access plan document in the board packet, there's a laundry list of items that the agency is moving forward with that have already currently implemented, which can be seen as our efforts as part of the system-wide fair study and equity analysis project. But I just would be remiss if I didn't say how excited I am to really take this deeper dive, and just being afforded the opportunity to have another dedicated resource, another transit equity specialist to be able to handle the day-to-day coordination across the agency as we implement these efforts. So this is the last slide here, but I just wanted to mention that the recommendation is for the approval of the RTD Board of Directors of the 2022 Title VI program update. And as far as next steps goes, there's a board action on May 24th, and then we will then submit to the Federal Transit Administration by May 31st, 2022. With that being said, I'll now open up the floor to any questions.
All righty, thank you very much, Mr. Green, for that really incredible and lengthy and very detailed report that obviously took a lot of work between you and your team, so really appreciate that. So at this time, I'd like to ask any directors who have questions or wish to speak to raise your virtual hands. I'll call on you in turn for directors or staff calling into the meeting. If you wish to speak, please press *9. And by the way, we do have 2 directors who are on the committee who probably need to leave around 6:30 p.m. our time. So just also keep that in mind for discussion purposes. One moment, I'm toggling between our, okay. Let's go to Director Lewis. Why don't we start with you? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Green, for a phenomenal presentation. So you know that equity is like probably the blood that is running through me, and I have never seen such a beautiful example of how you weave equity into the fabric of an agency and thread the tenets of justice into an agency. And I took a few notes as an opportunity to just celebrate you in this moment, because oh my goodness, what a thorough job you have done. But one of the first things I wrote down in my notes was compliance is the floor. And you said it. And I was like, all right, we're going to be okay. Compliance is the floor. I noticed in that report that you had the survey from the 36 folks. And I was just like, what a great addition to go out into community and ask about their perceptions, and to begin to create those partnerships. Really, really appreciated that. I really appreciated the threads that you were able to bring from like our strategic plan into the dashboards, I'll call them, and threading that all together. So it's like, oh, okay, I see where we're going with this, and I see how equity fits in, and it's not this like esoteric thing that you can't really explain, but it's like, no, here are some very great examples of how you do that, from the access considerations to the service monitoring, to the strategic planning, the distribution of amenities. I am just impressed. Like, what a brilliant presentation. So thank you all, General Manager. Thank you, Mr. Green, for you all's hard work. I have not seen an update to this degree, to this scale, to this excellence come before us. And so thank you so much. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thanks.
That's quite all right. You know, that you're absolutely right. And I ditto that for sure. Sorry, Director Whitmore, before we get to you, can we go to Ms. McManus, please?
Yes, I would like Mr. Green, if you wouldn't mind taking down the presentation so we can see the gallery.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I was like, uh-oh. All right, thank you very much, Ms. McManus, and thank you, Mr. Green. Director Whitmore. Just take yourself off mute. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Director Lewis, I don't have questions. I don't know how you could have questions after that report. We did see that presentation and heard that presentation last night in the other committee meeting, and it was just as good tonight, maybe even better. I appreciate all components and how you wove something that can be kind of benign, like statistics, into a real actionable plan. And I learned from your presentation. Again, the one component that was a bit better tonight was your introduction. Ms. Johnson, that was outstanding tonight. I think he was short a little bit last night. So there you go, Carl. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Whitmore. Director Tisdale, coming in by phone.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. I too join the comments as to the completeness and the impactfulness of the report. I particularly noted that in the materials, we had about 16 pages or so of the report that addressed what I had in the past considered as sort of the basic equity issues that we were addressing. And then I noticed we spent over 60 pages of the report dealing with the language issues. And I must say, it's probably the first time that I recall having that kind of detail presented to us relative to the limited English plan, and how we have set forth a pathway toward improving our communications with all populations in the region. I know that we have in the past made a special point of trying to have materials included in Spanish, but now to understand that we're looking at efforts to include some communication capability, not necessarily all materials, but communication capabilities relative to Vietnamese and Chinese as being number 3 and 4 in language groupings in the Denver metropolitan area. I was extremely struck by that and impressed. So I join in the accolades that have been offered and would suggest that it is very appropriate for this committee to approve the report, and that will be my vote. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. Next is Director Williams.
Sorry, I am also on my phone and having problems making this work. But yes, I want to include my congratulations on a job well done and information that is very relevant to the work that all of us do. I'd just like to ask that when we are looking particularly at limited English proficiency, that the help translating our website is on the very bottom of the page. And that link might be better off if it were prominently displayed when you looked at the top of our webpage, because people who are not speaking English, which the web pages are in, might have a hard time going through it to find that at the bottom. So just a suggestion as part of this great work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Williams, and also for that suggestion. Really appreciate that. And I think putting that translation link, or maybe where it says tools, would be very helpful on the website. So thank you again. Let's see. Any other questions, comments? Director Williams, did you want to lower your hand, or would you like to ask another question?
I'll get it down. Hold on, I got to figure that out on the phone. Lower hand.
All righty then. I think that's everybody. So are there any no votes on this action? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. There is one discussion item for this evening, and that is the August 2022 service change proposals. I'd like to ask Mr. Michael Ford, Chief Operations Officer, and Mr. Jesse Carter, Senior Manager of Service Development, to present this item. Perhaps before I do, General Manager CEO Johnson, did you have anything you'd like to present or add before that?
No, just thank you, Mr. Chair. You're in capable hands with Mr. Ford and Mr. Carter.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ford and Mr. Carter.
Thank you very much. I just want to give an update on the August 2022 service change proposals. The service change process, though contractually required, is an opportunity for the agency to update its transit services utilizing projected available resources. Since April 19, 2022, RTD has operated a level of service reflective of the impacts of COVID-19. As the community and country move forward from the various mandates and emergency policies that have affected commerce and mobility, challenges to workforce availability persist. Like many service-related entities, the transit industry has seen workforce availability greatly reduced. Recognizing the agency's reduced level of availability, transit operators and mechanics' efforts to update service plans continue to focus on providing customers with sustainable and reliable service within available resources. The services proposals herein are a combination of schedule adjustments and restoration of seasonal services previously suspended during summer of 2022. Efforts to increase operator availability through recruitment incentives and increased employee outreach continues, though current levels do not support substantial increases at service levels at this time. Additionally, the recently adopted CBA is anticipated to have positive impacts on both employee retention and recruitment. By way of discussion, in regularly implementing service changes to meet customers and community needs while considering available staff resources, RTD demonstrates its commitment to the strategic priorities of community value, customer excellence, and employee ownership. Recognizing the agency's existing workforce challenges, this proposal herein is intended to improve on-time performance, maintain CBA compliance, and adjust service levels to match ridership demands. By way of the board adopted guidance, I just would point out again service performance evaluations based on RTD service standards, the effects of the overall integrity of the transit network on transit-dependent markets, the availability of alternative services to affected customers, cost-effective distribution throughout the district and family of services, and the ability to enhance services when possible. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Benefits and services are provided without regard to race, color, or national origin. Also, disparate effects on low-income and minority populations, and responses to challenges or changes in communities where services are provided. You have a summary of the proposed service changes for August 2022. There are going to be public hearings June 21st at 12 and 5 p.m. and on June 22nd at 5 p.m. as well. So with that, you do have a summary of these proposed changes. We do have meetings coming up. I would ask at this time to take questions and to have Jesse Carter join me for any other comments that you might have.
So private, thank you, Mr. Ford. And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Please do, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Yeah, I don't want to forego saying it, but I never want to follow a Carl Green presentation again. That is a tough act to follow for sure, and I look forward to continuing working with him. So
I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, you may not have that choice in the future.
I would imagine not. I would imagine not. Okay, with that, as Mr. Ford has stated, the service changes for August 2022 are largely focused on putting back the services that we suspended in May. Those were largely school trippers and services in the Boulder area that are primarily aimed at serving the CU campus. So with that, we also have some on-time performance work that will result in some small schedule changes here and there, although we are hearing that there may be some detours that will be necessary on the Route 3. So I look forward to bringing you back more information on what's going on Alameda in subsequent meetings as we move towards July. So with that, I'd like to open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ford and Carter. And why don't we go to Director Tisdale first?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question relative to commuter rail service, and I recognize that when talking about the A line, we are principally addressing Denver Transit operators and their operation of the A line from Union Station to the airport. But I wondered, given the frequency of the dropped runs text messages that I receive relative to that line, is there a sense that at least until the CBA has an opportunity to increase operators, and I know DTO is not covered by our CBA, but is there a thought that we should look at the A line, at least on an interim basis, and adjust the frequencies that we are promising? Because I know we still hit high numbers, and it seems like I get messages every 20 minutes. And of course, I exaggerate to illustrate. I realize that we still have a very high percentage of performance on those, but I'm just wondering, should we consider working with DTO on adjusting frequency in order to address that problem? And that is my question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. And go on ahead, Mr. Ford and Cotter.
I think there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes in terms of what we're trying to do with the second crew member. Obviously, not having that person armed, we are making some headway with some recruitment opportunities. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, but we are trying to be proactive and communicate with our public when we have these issues. And we're working and meeting with Allied on a weekly basis. I know Chief Martingano has been involved in that, and we meet on a weekly basis to address the cadence of where we're at and what we're trying to do. So I think it'll be a matter of time, but I think we're making some headway, and I don't know about at this point trying to rearrange times and schedules given where we're at. We're all having these challenges within the system, but I do think we will be making some good headway here very shortly.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please do.
Sorry, Director Tisdale, that is a really good and thoughtful suggestion in looking at the level of service that we're offering. But one of the things that I would be concerned with is our current ridership on the University of Colorado A line is the highest among our commuter rail. It's actually the highest among any of our rail lines. And we would have to be very careful about basically chopping the frequency in half and how that would affect crowding. And I'd like to have an opportunity to take a look at what that would mean from a load standard basis before we could report back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the responses.
Thank you, Director Tisdale. And thank you, gentlemen. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, observations? Director Lewis.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You all always do a very good job, very thorough job as well. So don't be too intimidated, Mr. Carter. Just one question about the 42 and the 45. I see that these are to provide an allocation of respite for our operators, and I'm always in support of that. Does that change the headways any for these two routes? Or are they just slight adjustments?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Please do.
Okay. Actually, yeah, what we're looking at is one side of both of those routes are actually in neighborhoods. So for our operators to use the restroom, we don't want them knocking on doors. So instead, what we have to do is make sure that they have enough time or ample time at the locations that are at our facilities. And most notably, that would be Peoria Station. So we need to kind of change some times around there. It will not reduce or change the level of frequency that we're offering on those routes.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Any other directors would like to comment or have a question? All righty. Seeing none, thank you very much to Mr. Ford and Mr. Carter for that presentation and for the service change proposal. Are there any other matters to discuss at this time? There you go. Director Lewis, go on ahead.
Thank you so much. This is more of maybe a comment and an opportunity to maybe come back at a later date for staff, but I've had a few inquiries from constituents regarding e-bikes being able to lock up their e-bikes at our park and rides and other areas throughout the district. And so if you all might come back with us regarding a policy, because it's my understanding that is behavior that is not approved by RTD, and I am not aware of it at all. And so would love to talk with y'all about that.
Thank you very much, Director Lewis. Appreciate that. Did anybody want to respond to that immediately, or just you'll get back to us?
Looks like the general manager.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just want.
Oh, Johnson has her hand up.
General Manager, CEO Deborah Johnson, would you like to respond to that?
Well, actually, I just wanted some clarification. So I think it would help us out as staff so we could adequately respond to your inquiry if we could have more information. So if I could ask just for some elaboration relative to, you said the behavior, are you saying that our policy does not allow for electric bikes to be, okay. So I just wanted to clarify so we weren't going in one direction. So thank you. Very much. You're welcome.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Thank you, General Manager Johnson. Director Broom.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if we could have a short discussion about overtime, about how much is currently being used to meet our scheduling and how much of that is mandatory.
Chair.
Madam General Manager.
Yes, thank you very kindly. And I will yield the floor to Mr. Ford because he probably has a response. But to Director Broom's point, we could provide that information, recognizing that that's a financial aspect. We will discern, since it came up in this committee, bring it back forward, but want to be clear, RTD does not mandate overtime at this juncture. So I just wanted to qualify that for all, but we will work in tandem with you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ford will as we schedule this item. So Mr. Ford, I'll yield the floor to you.
Thank you, CEO Johnson. I was just going to probably say the same thing. We can come back with some more information, but we are currently not mandating anyone at this particular time. So we will endeavor to give you some of the overtime information that you're requesting.
I'm guessing how much overtime do we normally budget for, and are we above or below, that usage would be what I'd be interested in, because I think that shows whether there's still pressure in terms of the amount of service that we're providing with the number of employees that we currently have on hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Director Broom. Would anybody like to comment or just we will follow up?
I will follow up, as Ms. Johnson alluded.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other directors? Mr. Broom, did you have any others, or just your hand is still up?
My hand is still up. I need the exercise.
Fair enough. All righty. Well, in that event, the next meeting is Wednesday, June 15th, 2022. The next Operations and Safety Committee meeting will be Wednesday, June 15th, 2022. A study session for Reimagine RTD is also scheduled for that same evening, and with a study session scheduled to commence first and the committee second. Seeing no other discussion, do I have I guess, do we usually do a motion to adjourn, or I just adjourn?
So moved to adjourn.
All right. Do I hear a second? All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you very much to all the directors and all the general manager and your team. Thank you very much.
Bye, folks.
Bye now.